Hi guys, me and Mr. Feeny Houdini, hi, say hi to the good people, hi, are back with Genesis 13 commentary. I was just explaining to him that we are doing I Read and I Learn. I'm Donna, and we're Sparrowstudios7, and he needs to stay here with me so we can have a calm video. Right, Feeny? Yeah? Good boy. So, Genesis chapter 13 is all about how Abram and Lot go their separate ways. And my Bible does have about 8 notes on the subject, so I'm going to go ahead and read those. And then I'll give you some more of my thoughts on the matter. Good to go. Okay. So, Chapter 13, 1 through 7. This story is set in conflict amidst God's blessings in the opening verses. Abram returns to a place where he had built an altar. Previous events, or emphasizes Abram's return to the land, is described. This is described in verses 3 through 4, where it says, From the Negev they continued traveling by stages toward Bethel, and they pitched their tents between Bethel and Ai, where they had camped before. This was the same place where Abram had built the altar there, and there he worshipped the Lord again. So after the conflict in Egypt with Pharaoh, with him lying about Sarai being his sister instead of his wife, and Pharaoh rebuking them and exiling them out of the land because of the lie, because God sent plagues on Pharaoh and his family. Abram turns back to the Lord, goes back to where he had worshipped before, and worships the Lord again and renews his faith. So, the note about 13:2, Abram already had powerful resources. We saw this also in chapter 12, verse 5, where it said, He took his wife Sarai, his nephew Lot, and all his wealth, his livestock, and all the people he had taken into his household at Haran, and headed to Canaan. Abram traveled through the land as far as Shechem. This is verse 6. Then he set up camp beside the oak of Moreh. At that time, the area was inhabited by Canaanites. So, mentions in chapter 12 verse 5 that he's already wealthy. Then he's more wealthy after leaving Egypt. So, his Egypt sojourn had augmented or given him more wealth and power. We see that in verses 5 through 7 that Lot, his nephew, was also wealthy, with flocks and herds. Tents figure prominently in Lot's story. We'll see this more in the chapters to come, but it's noted specifically that Lot moved his tents in verse 12. The Canaanites and the Perizzites, we also see them in Genesis 34:30 and Deuteronomy 7:1, Judges 1:4, and chapter 3, verse 5. Held the well-watered land. The quarrel between Abram's and Lot's herdsmen left Abram more vulnerable to attack. It continues with the next note in 8:13. Abram, to whom the Lord was promised, might have told Lot to find his own place. Abram's generosity was an act of faith. He knew that even if he gave the whole land away, God would still give it to him and his descendants. Abram did not have to cling to things, whereas Lot's choices were self-seeking. Specifically about verse 8, Abram was concerned that there be no conflict. The Hebrew word for conflict is meribah between them, as they were close relatives, literally brothers. Moses later reproved Israel over the incident in the wilderness at Meribah. We'll see this in Exodus 17, 1 through 7, and Numbers 21 through 13. And instructed them on exercising faith in such situations. Meribah thereafter became a watchword for testing and striving with the Lord in unbelief. And we see that in 13 verse 10, what appealed to Lot would be short-lived. In the garden of the Lord, Adam and Eve succumbed to their craving for what they saw. Israel was later enslaved in Egypt. Sodom and Gomorrah are reminders of putting intense desires ahead of obedience to God. We see this in Genesis 3, verses 5 through 6, and 1 John 2, verse 16. Zoar was a small town in the plain to which Lot and his daughters later fled. We'll talk about that in chapter 19, 8 through 22. It was previously called Bela. So I do also want to make a note here that I learned early on in these videos. Whenever somebody moves east, it's representative that they are moving out of God's will, or away from God, or possibly in rebellion of God. Adam and Eve moved east out of Eden. Cain moved east away and was involved in a lot of violence, and his descendants were involved in a lot of violence before everyone joined in and flood happened. It was a whole thing. But this is Abram moving west, or Abram moving in the land of Canaan, or not moving east, is representative of him remaining in God's will, and Lot moving away from God's will and being self-seeking, going east towards the well-watered land, Sodom and Gomorrah, and all these places that are called wicked in the scripture. And it actually says in verses 10 and through 13, Lot took a long look at the fertile plains of the Jordan Valley in the direction of Zoar. The whole area was well watered everywhere, like in the garden of the Lord, or the beautiful land of Egypt. This was before the Lord destroyed Sodom and Gomorrah. Lot chose for himself the whole Jordan Valley to the east of them. He went there with his flocks and servants, and parted company with his uncle Abram. So Abram settled in the land of Canaan, and Lot moved his tents to a place near Sodom, and settled among the cities of the plain. But the people of this area were extremely wicked, and constantly sinned against the Lord. So Lot could have chosen anywhere, and this is foreshadowing of some of the trouble that he'll have later in his life, choosing to go this way. While in contrast, Abram gave up the best with faith, so that he trusting the Lord, so that God would take care of him, essentially. And he chose to move in Lot's benefit, as opposed to his own. He just knocked the Bible off my lap. That was highly disrespectful, Shorty. He just wants to move. Go on then. You want to move? You want to go? Okay, no, he wants to stay. Okay, so thank you for listening, and I'll be back in a few minutes with a live. God bless.